People say at least one crazy thing has happened to you in life. But I've had several. My life has been nothing short of a roller coaster ride. It all started when I lost everything. I had a beautiful house, car, clothes, and anything you can name until the day I lost my job. I was still paying for my home and car, and when I was unable to make payments, they were repossessed. I was forced out into the streets with nothing but the clothes on my back and whatever I salvaged from my house. If that wasn't bad enough, all my things were stolen after just a few days of being homeless. I was forced to eat out of garbage cans, use gas station bathrooms, and wear the same clothes for months. My life had gone entirely downhill. That was until the day everything changed, when I met a beautiful woman. She was tall, had long, flowing hair, and the features of a supermodel. She was so beautiful that people walking would freeze just to stare at her. When she locked eyes with me, I was confused. I never thought someone like her would ever pay attention to someone as poor and grimy as me in a million years. She found me sitting against a wall, walked right up to me with a big smile, and said, "Do you need somewhere to stay?" After jumping at the opportunity like a madman, she introduced herself to me as Stacy. She sat with me on the ground, talking about my life and how I ended up living on the streets. She told me that she was well off and owned apartments that I could stay in until I was back on my feet. When she finally took me to her apartment complex, I nearly had a heart attack. It was so gorgeous that I was in total disbelief. There was a pool, game room, and even a team of chefs at our disposal. It was clearly a place for the rich. I refused to even think about how much the rent cost, since I knew I'd never be able to afford to stay there. Stacy, however, was very generous to me. She gave me one of the best rooms in the complex and stocked it out with food. Once I was comfortable, she introduced me to another woman, who was a designer. I thought her friend was just as beautiful. She and Stacy had the same green eyes. Stacy's friend helped me to get cleaned up and changed my whole wardrobe. When she was finished with me, I looked 10 times better than I ever have in my entire life. Soon, the women in the complex were all drooling over me. They tried their best to get my attention, but Stacy never let that happen. She made sure that I spent most of my time with her, and I wasn't going to object. In a short time, Stacy and I had become almost inseparable. She took me out to eat dinner at fancy restaurants, go to the movies, visit amusement parks, and do lots of other fun things. It felt like I was living a dream. There, I was in the company of one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen, and she was catering to me. Stacy also helped me to find a good job at a local company as a supervisor. Sometimes I felt like Stacy had a crush on me, but I wasn't sure, so I tried not to push my luck with her. Whenever we weren't hanging out together, Stacy spent her time taking trips, and I would be left at home in the company of her best friend. I always thought that her friend acted very strange around me. She was always watching me like a hawk and following me up and down all day like a stalker. She constantly batted her eyelashes and giggled at everything I said, even if it wasn't funny. At first, I thought it was a little cute, but it soon became very annoying. She always made sure to mention how single she was whenever we had a conversation. That was when the realization dawned on me that her friend must have had a crush on me. But it made no sense. Although she could sometimes be so sweet and clingy with me, she was still very rude. She ordered me around like I was her employee, and whenever she didn't get her way, she would grow hysteric. She'd hurl mean insults at me or even throw objects like a child. There was even one time she threw her purse at me and hit me in the eye. I had a black eye for a whole week. Even though she behaved like a spoiled brat, I never told Stacy because I didn't want to cause problems with her friendship. I soon learned that I was only wishful thinking. After some time had passed, I noticed that Stacy and her friends started to hang out a lot less. Whenever I hung out with both of them, things were always extremely awkward. It always seemed like Stacy and her friend were fighting for my attention. If I helped Stacy out of the car, her friend would start complaining that she needed help too. If I complimented the friend's dress, Stacy would get upset and ask if her dress was pretty too. It was like both of them were trying to mark their territory on me. After Stacy realized her friend wasn't backing down, she got extremely possessive. She never left us for a long time whenever she traveled and refused to let me out of her sight, especially around her friend. I couldn't believe that two gorgeous women were fighting for my attention. I felt like a celebrity. Until everything went haywire. One day, when Stacy was out on a business trip, her best friend came to my job, threatening to make a big scene if I didn't make her my girlfriend. I decided to stand my ground. I told her I was fed up with her poor conduct and that she couldn't threaten me into liking her. She must have thought I was only bluffing because she began throwing a big tantrum. No one was able to calm her down, and once the boss found out that she was there because of me, I was fired on the spot. She even followed me home trying to start a huge fight. That was the last straw for me. Once I got to my apartment, I called Stacy anonymously and tipped her off about a huge fight happening in her complex. At first, she didn't seem to think it was an emergency, until I mentioned that two women were fighting over her newest tenant. Stacy grew furious. She rushed home that evening and caught her best friend right in the act of mistreating me. After that moment, it turned into a complete brawl. Stacy ran over to her friend with a loud scream and jumped on her. They were pulling hair, biting, and scratching each other. I had no idea Stacy would react so violently. I ran over to pull her off her friend when she yelled something that completely shocked me. "You're the worst sister anyone could have!" she screamed. I was dumbfounded at how two sisters could act so terrible to each other. The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. I had always thought they resembled each other. It would also explain why both of them had the exact same eye color. Stacy and her sister stopped fighting and started arguing about who was worse. According to Stacy, they were both wealthy heirs, but her sister was never satisfied. She always wanted everything Stacy had. I was just an innocent bystander in all of this drama. But soon, I ended up in deep trouble, too. Both women demanded that I choose who I actually wanted to be with. It felt as if a spotlight was shining on me. Knowing that they were sisters only made the situation more awkward. I wasn't sure if I would be able to handle it, so I decided to leave. That's when something even more shocking happened. The two women finally put aside their differences and begged me to stay. They even came up with a ridiculous lie about how the complex was haunted, and they needed a man there to make sure they remained safe. They told me that there have been multiple complaints from some of the tenants about strange occurrences and sounds late at night. I thought the idea was completely absurd. But they seemed to believe it, and even offered to pay me to stay there. Knowing I needed all the help I could get, I decided not to turn the money down and stay, no matter how awkward it was. After I agreed to stay, the two women told me they had one condition for me.